With the top fold pinned, I'm going to go ahead and slide it onto this arm of my sewing machine. So I'll do that by just coming around. Let me show you the bottom of it. I'm going to come around the bottom here and I'll just slide it up. So it's like a little sleeve on my sewing machine, and I can kind of rotate it around like this. And I'm going to rotate it till I get to my seam, and that's where I'm going to start, is at my seam. To line up the seam allowance, I'm going to line it up with 3/4 of an inch. And you might be saying, there's no 3/4 of an inch marked on there. Well, there isn't, but there is a 5/8 of an inch. And I know that each of these lines is an 1/8 of an inch. So this one would be 3/8, and then this one's 4/8. This one's 5/8, and the next one would be 6/8. And 6/8 simplified is 3/4. So that's 3/4 right here is this line. So that's when you're going to line it up with. You'll find that on your own machine. So find that, and then you're going to line up the edge of your fabric with that. You can also just look from the edge and count over too. So you can go 1, 2, and that's how you can find your 3/4 if that's less confusing for you. I'm going to line the edge of my fabric up with that, and I'll line my needle up with the seam here. So I'm lining those two things up. Once I have those two things lined up, sorry you're shaking, I'm going to lower my presser foot, and I'm ready to start sewing here. I'm going to back stitch using my handy little back stitch arrow. So I'll go forward 3 first, then back 3, and then I'll continue all the way around. So I'll go, take my pin out of the way, 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to back stitch 1, 2, 3. This whole time I want to make sure that I am sewing on this right side piece of fabric that I can see and this wrong side. So I want to make sure I'm catching both of those. If this piece is over here, I might need to adjust it so that it comes back over, because if I don't catch it, then I'll have a hole, okay? So make sure that you're sewing on top of this folded over piece the whole time, and you can adjust as you need to as you go. So I'm going to keep sewing. I've done my back stitch, and then I'll just keep everything lined up with my 3/4 inch on the stitch plate. Remove pins as I come to them. Oops, sorry. And you can see this is kind of bunching up. Maybe I just need to lift my presser foot up a little bit and keep sewing to keep it from bunching up anymore. I want to keep my fingers out of the way of my machine so I don't sew over them. And as I go, I'm just going to rotate my fabric around this arm of the sewing machine. Now I'm getting close to my next seam, and I'm just going to trim these threads so they don't get tangled up when I sew over them again. But you can see the seam that I already did is coming back around, and I'm going to sew over this back stitching I did, and I'll back stitch again once I sew over that. So I'm going to keep sewing, and then you can see I'm going over the back stitching I already did. I'll go about 1/4 inch over that seam, and then I'm going to back stitch again using my back stitch button. So I'll go back 1, 2, 3 to 5 stitches, and then I'll go forward 1, 2, 3 stitches. Then I'm good to lift up my presser foot and trim my threads. Like that. I've now sewn everything I need to for my pouch, and I have this casing. If I turn it right side out, then I have a little, you don't see the folded stuff, but you see a little line all the way around, and there should be a hole over here from my dots where I can put my drawstring through.